Hello, ladies. We are in the month of May, but experiencing a lot of April rain showers. Today we're going to talk about, I guess, two things. Um, I'm going to start with a little bit of recollection from modeling because everybody's like, "Are you done the model stories?" And there's actually a couple more things to talk about. One of the things I left out was that I was the board of advisors, and spokesmodel for fashion to figure stores, which was owned and still is owned by the great grandsons of Lane Bryant. One of the interesting things is that as I start telling my stories, I have this knack for getting involved with businesses that are extremely promising just before, like in their startup stages. So I was in the Palisades Mall and with a friend, and I always had my eyes open for new plus size stores or plus size fashions or anything that had to do with plus size. Now, again, this is before Facebook, before MySpace. So I noticed this store that said FTF and it had the plus sizes in it, and I had never heard of it. So I walked over and asked to speak with the manager. I kind of looked at the clothes and I was like, okay. And I introduced myself. I think at the time I was either Miss New York Plus America or actually Miss Plus America. And I didn't really have a goal at that moment, but to introduce myself and to present probably the opportunity to either model or do something in the store. And when they went to go get the managers, they explained to me that they were the great-grandsons of great-great-great-grandsons of Lane Bryant. Don't quote me on the greats. And they gave me the history of how Lane Bryant started and the transitions that the store went on into. And that they were, developing concepts and things like that. So after several conversations, they decided that they wanted to bring me in as a spokesmodel and board of advisors. But ironically, they were more interested in me being in an advisory position. And part of that was, and this is not to offend anyone, but when I walked in and I explained I was Miss Plus America and Miss New York Plus America and started talking a little bit more about my background, they kind of chuckled when I told them that I had went to the George Washington University. And they kind of took a step back, like, okay, what's with the pageantry? And I explained that it was a partial strategy because I had been, modeling for more than 10 years, probably by then, in kind of redefining my business. And without labeling it back then as brand, but basically reestablishing my brand. And I said, oh, okay. So this led into several lunches and conversations, and basically we were leading up to developing an event at the store. The first thing they wanted me to do was to meet with a woman that many of you in the Black fashion world or African American fashion world would know. Is a woman by the name of Audrey Smaltz, who was part of, I believe, the original Ebony Fashion Fair. And I found out that she was also very involved, I guess, in the same, what they were trying to do is put me in the same kind of position, I think, that she was in modeling. But of course, they probably didn't have those same opportunities for minority models. And I think she was not a plus size model. She was actually a straight size model. So it was great to have someone who had such a historical background in fashion, particularly focused. I mean, she had these amazing stories of the time during Dr. King's era, and so on and so forth, what was going on with models in fashion. But I think the company, once again, was a new startup kind of company. It was still kind of defining itself and getting funding, and there were different stages that they were going through. So what I really wanted was to be more so the spokesmodel. Like at that stage in my career, I was thinking in terms of being the spokesmodel for the store, the brand, I guess you would call it now, for the store, and kind of map out a business plan with that, like a fashion campaign and that kind of thing that I was trying to achieve. But in their minds, because of my educational background and experience in the industry, they were looking at me as more of an advisor that could be part of a bigger business plan. And I did have this, and I still do, I have this knack for touching something that ends up being really popular. So the first thing that I liked back then, which is so funny, because I don't even think it was on the regular markets yet. If it was, I didn't see it in a lot of stores. The first thing that I actually kept attracting my eye to was the Moroccan skirts. And as you all know, that became extremely popular for a long time. So they were kind of watching what attracted me to wear, what I preferred to wear, and inquiries and so on and so forth. I did end up doing an event at the store that was to be like the featured, Miss Plus America at the store, doing consultation for fashion and makeup, which I did with a company that I was working with at the time. And what was interesting is, I was trying to figure out the best way to put this. But basically, as you're getting older, and can feel that now, and now I look back at some of the experiences that I was in, it takes a mature process to let go of some things that you're just past, or you can make comebacks, but every time you make a comeback, you're going to be a little different because you're going to be seeing things a little differently. And I think as women, as we get older, we don't have to feel like, oh, we're too old to do this or we're too old to do that. But we do have to own our age, and we have to own our experience. And I've never understood personally, like, older people or older women or older males. It would be like an older athlete comparing themselves to the MVP of today and want to compete. I mean, you could compare the statistics, but to really think that you could get out there and compete with the 20-something-year-old and now you're aging out of your profession, probably not the best thing to do. You probably need to find something else to do. We're looking at now where a lot of the people who started different aspects of the rap game P. Diddy, LL Cool J, they're all retiring now. This is our generation, right? A little bit older. Because they're seeing something in where they are in life. So I would have to say, like I said, plus size modeling gives you a certain amount of longevity. And you'll probably be asked to be featured, but your platform should really kind of shift to something that teaches and learns and kind of sets your legacy, as opposed to I think trying to compete with that new wave. Speaking in terms of, that being the career, the profession that you're in. I mean, there are plus size models now who are my age, just beginning. And it's their experience, their, what they want to do with that time frame. But for myself, I've been plus size modeling for over 20 some odd years. So I'm definitely at a different place with the whole industry than probably someone who's my age, someone who's just starting pageantry. I probably have different thoughts and feelings about it. But my suggestion is really to, see where you are, see what it means to you, and then start to define your plan with it. So moving on back to television. So last time we left off, we were talking about MSNBC and some of the transitions there. And I think I left off with about to speak a little bit about Fox News Channel. So just to kind of get the timing right, I actually was interviewed by Fox News Channel shortly after MSNBC. I was going to tell a little quick Sony story, the company Sony story too in there, but I'll get back to the interview process during that time period later. The job that I actually ended up taking was with HBO. So we are jumping a couple television stories ahead and we'll backtrack. But I felt like talking about this story in particular today, and I saw a couple things about Fox News this week. So the first time I interviewed was right after MSNBC. And the gentleman that I interviewed with, I found out, I think later on, that he either had just been hired for the position or just promoted into the position. And his job was to make sure that the Fox News was getting ready to be number one. That could be a solid competitor to probably MSNBC or CNN, whichever one was the top one. So one of the things that they were doing was actually interviewing people who had worked at these stations, and I was one of those people. Now, from my recollection, I don't remember thinking Fox News Channel was this ultra conservative station. I think my mind was just thinking that they were business oriented. I believe I was brought in, one, because I had interned at WTTG Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. I also had the United States Capitol Hill background, and I was on the Hill during the time of the Congress was mostly Republican, I believe. And also I worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which was business oriented. So when I look back, those things were probably shining, and I had just came from one of the all news networks. So these were probably all pluses to landing on the doorstep of New York's Fox News Channel. Now, a lot of times I'll say Fox News Channel, people get it confused with Fox News. Fox News local affiliates are different than the 24-hour news channel, which is national and international. So this is where I ended up going to my interview for. So after the interview, the gentleman was impressed, and I went through the series of questions, I believe, and I remember him saying something like, "You got all the answers correct, except one where it was a correct answer, but it was in a different order." And the different order was probably most likely because I was used to doing news from an NBC, MSNBC perspective. So I didn't get a call back, but he kept saying, "Keep in touch." And at the time, I didn't really understand why. I was like, "Well, are you going to hire me in the next 3 months, next 6 months? I kind of have some things I got to do here." So I did not get a call back the first time, which is why I ended up starting to work at HBO, which I'll talk about later. Speeding up to 2000. Now you got to understand .com boom. So there was a period in time at HBO where you had the well-known merger of Time Warner and AOL, which I was right in the middle of too. Joy. So what happens during mergers and acquisitions? Anyone know? Yeah. They start getting reorganizing departments. Yeah, it's becoming more of a common thing these days, but it wasn't as common back then. So I can't remember whether, I think Fox called me out of the blue, and maybe because I did keep in touch with the gentleman, because he just kept saying that he wanted to hire me, but not yet. And I did find out that basically it was because he had a very specific plan involved. So I was kind of on hold, and he wanted, wanted to wait a little bit, because I was also pretty young. I was 21, 2, 3, something like that. So anyway, I think they called me. They must have heard about the merger and acquisition or something. And so I went in for the second interview, but this was literally almost 3 years later. And I went through a similar process. Did you remember all the questions? What are your answers today? But they had pretty much decided that it was time to bring me in. And they said, "We're going to start you on the overnight shift." Okay. So this was cool, because then I could keep my job or jobs at HBO. So this is where we get into Erica working and having 1 hour of sleep. So my morning started at like 8 o'clock at night, or 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And then I would travel into the city and start working at the desk somewhere between 9, 10 o'clock at night, and would finish at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then at 9:30, my other job started at HBO, and I would be at HBO from 9:30 till 5:30, 6:30. And understand that my commute was approximately an hour, both ways, going and coming an hour. So this led to having an hour of sleep Monday through Friday, and half days. I also worked every day. So if I wasn't at HBO, I was pretty much at Fox. So the first story that I remember going out on, let me give you another picture, because I talked a little bit about MSNBC. MSNBC to me was very production oriented. And because they were defining themselves as this new brand of news and technology and convergence, they were very focused on what was exciting back then, having these amazing graphics. They were very focused on the way the programming looked. Not so much the content. The content was more pulled feeds. Like I said, they had a huge production team. And the production team was unionized. But I was always a little taken aback because the production team always seemed like they were watching Jerry Springer. So I remember, and they were also paid very well, and so on and so forth. At Fox, there was more of a focus on the editorial team. So to translate that in today, there was more of a focus on the content, the perspective, and the way the news was written. I don't remember there being a huge production team, or at least not during the overnight shift I was on. And I remember there wasn't that many people. The editorial desk was pretty much it. And I remember there was space for a lot of writers. But of course, again, I was there during the overnight. The facility was smaller, so there couldn't have been as many people there. So that was one of the biggest difference. There was definitely more of an emphasis, and we had more control over what you saw on the news than the position that I was in at MSNBC. So I remember one of the first stories they sent me out with was kind of fluffy. It was as soon as I walked in, I guess one of the producers or reporters didn't want it to go, so they sent me to the mall. It was Halloween, and we were kind of focusing on kids not trick-or-treating anymore outside, but that the malls were given these kind of opportunities, so on and so forth. The next story that I recall was kind of, again, speeding up to the primary election season of 2000. So this was the time that Bill Bradley was running. And because I had the Washington background, they said, okay, well, she should go out and see how it goes on that story. So I think that was actually at Grand Central Station. I think he was doing a talk or speech or something at Grand Central Station. And I believe that was the first time I was in Grand Central Station, maybe. So I remember that. But one of the things that really was kind of a defining moment and biggest memory that I had at Fox News Channel was the story was a potential, well, there was a fire at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. And this came overnight. So we were at the desk, and the feed comes through that showing the university. And I don't know that we saw the flames. By the time we got the feed, and a feed is basically the videotape that you're watching on the monitor in real time, we saw, somebody said that they had worked in medical. They might have actually been in ambulatory care. I can't really remember, but they said the ambulance that's there is because someone died or is critical to potentially death. So the whole news department and everything, because this was going to be a huge story, all eyes were on the news feed and trying to obtain information. So, it was kind of back and forth between Simon, editor, and the people make the decisions in the feed tape room. No, the guy's like, no, I want to see what's going on, and, trying to monitor because, always dealing with the ratings. And the guy's like, no, I'm telling you that ambulance is for somebody who's critical or close to death. So finally he says, okay, so he tells one of the ladies, so the one girl picks up the phone and she's calling the police department, fire department in New Jersey to try to figure out whether or not unfortunately, if someone had died or there was injuries, major injuries. So everyone was saying no, for the most part. Hospitals didn't have any reports. They couldn't even tell you the ambulance that we thought was there. We weren't really getting any information. They couldn't get in touch with anyone to verify it. So my mind went to being at the George Washington University, and the fact that, for those of you who are in Guthridge Hall now, it used to be the athletic dorm. I actually lived in Guthridge Hall for most of my college career. But I remember across or through the alleyway of Guthridge was the fire department. And the fire department, I believe, was a Washington, D.C. fire department. But you always felt kind of safe because the fire department was so close to campus. And then a couple doors down was our campus police department. And, of course, a couple streets over was the George Washington University Hospital, which, as many of you know, is credited for saving President Ronald Reagan, amongst other dignitaries. So my mind went to immediately the first people who are going to know are going to be the students, maybe a student newspaper, radio station, television station, the campus police, a campus hospital. That's, as soon as they said university, that's what I thought, because of the process at our university. And I believe at most universities, the information is kind of parlayed from the campus, police, fire, medical to the state, city, and also because you're dealing with students, you're dealing with ages of information being released, etc. So I got on the phone and found the information for a student who was, I believe, on the radio or newspaper staff, something at Seton Hall. And he said, someone died. I'm going over there now to try to find out what's going on because I'm the student news representative. And I said, can I keep you on the phone? Can you call me back? I think this might have been the era of pagers or something. So he said, yeah. So I wonder where that student is today. So he did end up contacting me, confirming from what he knew, what he was going to report on, that there was a student that had died. Now, he didn't, of course, have the names at the time, and I don't think if he had the names, we would have been able to publish that or broadcast that. So I told the desk, I said, I got a student that's at the scene saying that there has been students dying. So, of course, the person next to me kept saying, no, I have the police department on, and, there's nothing going on. So I said, so they're like, did you check your facts? Okay. So I think I called the campus police. I called another school entity, and probably was the campus police. And the answer was, we can't give you that information until the next of kin is told. So what does that really mean? You're not saying no, and you're not saying yes. You're saying you can't give me information, but the last part is kind of giving you the information. So I repeated that and told the desk. So there was this battle between what I was saying and what the other person was saying, and the person who had to make the decision. So for whatever reason, they decided to go to another story. And I guess within, I want to say, minutes, another news station leads with information on, unfortunately, students being killed in the fire at Seton Hall University. So I remember, I guess shortly later, the big bosses are always watching, even on the overnight shift, of course. I forget which big boss it was, but someone called him, person who was in charge of the desk, because the other news team led in student being killed at Seton Hall, New Jersey, in a fire. And we weren't even, I think they weren't even focusing on the scene anymore. So needless to say, in the world of television news, you just got beat, which also meant that the other station's ratings were flying high, and especially because we were all in that New York, New Jersey metropolitan area. I believe it was actually probably MSNBC, because MSNBC was actually located in New Jersey. So I remember the guy who was in charge just looking at me like, "You were right." And he just kept saying that all night. And at the moment, I didn't really understand what was going on in his mind. And obviously, I didn't hear the reprimand on the phone. So the next day or so, they, unbeknownst to us at that moment, started making inquiries about the Seton Hall story and how it was handled. So they actually brought us in individually. So you didn't really know what the other person was saying. And all I can remember is that the person who had to do the questioning was the person who had hired me and hired, obviously, the other people. And I remember him saying that, he says, what happened to the story? So we didn't really walk in thinking we were being interrogated about it. We were just saying what happened that night. Maybe it was in prep for the rest of the story for the week, or at least that's what I thought. So I started telling him, pretty much what I just said here. Probably a little bit more specific because the memory is probably stronger. And he looked at me and he said, "I believe you, but that's not what they're saying." And I said, "What?" And he says, "That's not what he's saying." But he said, "I believe you." And first of all, because of the way your thought process went. You explained a whole thought process to coming to these decisions, which is, pretty much how my brain goes from the past to the present very quickly. And then, eventually gets to the moment. But that was definitely a defining moment. Shortly after that conversation, I think it was maybe a week later, he said, we want to move you to daytime on something called Futures, which at the time I wasn't quite clear on what Futures was. But the issue was that I was working 2 jobs and I had already, the salary was so low, it was lower overnight than both MSNBC and HBO. To move to daytime, the salary was less, even though it was daytime. So in a way, and I still kind of scratch my head on this because I felt like it was a demotion. But when you think about news, everybody wants to be on that morning daytime shift. So I don't know, maybe I should give the guy a call and rekindle that question. But I ended up not taking it, more because I didn't want to lose the work that I was doing at HBO. And I still was kind of confused as to what exactly the change was for. There's another thing to note, kind of while I was at the desk and kind of through the differences in editorial style. So I remember they said, Erica, I want you to look for some feature stories. So I would start going through the magazines and different publications and wires, etc., looking for feature stories. And one of the things that attracted me, I was so into technology, particularly Business Week. So I remember opening up the magazine at the time, and it was this whole series on virtual technology, right? So I said, we should really do a story on, they're going to have these things that you stick in your ear, and you're actually going to hear people on the phone, but without a phone, and you're going to be able to talk to them. And the desk was kind of looking at me like, right. And I said, no, you got to read this article here. And they were looking at me like, that's not going to happen for like 20 years. You're going to be able to talk to the phone and it's in your ear. So then they said, no, we want you to maybe pick up the Inquirer or the New York Daily News or the New York Post. And why don't you update us on what Britney Spears is doing? That's the kind of stories we like to do here for features. Countdown to the conference. I am the International Brand Ambassador for Sexy and Wealthy in Heels.